What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be going over the origins and the rituals behind American holidays. So when it comes to certain holidays such as Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Valentine's Day, we utilize this time and we utilize these holidays as a celebration of being around loved ones. Right, with Christmas, it's all about the Christmas spirit, handing out gifts, being around the Christmas tree, being around the fireplace, our kids opening presents. Thanksgiving, we sitting at the table around loved ones, eating, having a good time. Valentine's Day, showing the love and appreciation to our spouse and our significant other. We utilize this time to show appreciation to our loved ones and just spend time with loved ones to have a great time. So the U.S. government or the U.S. Congress has signed a bill to allow these certain holidays to become federal holidays, such as Christmas, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, etc., etc. And state governments have allotted this time for federal employees to be off of work or for children to be off of school. So we look forward to these holidays most of the time to just be off work or to be out of school, which I don't blame y'all. We need to take what we can get. But what if I told you that there is a mysterious origin behind these holidays? What if I told you that there is a ritualistic aspect when it comes to these certain holidays? See, everything is a ritual, right? The higher ups, the elites, whatever you want to call them, this world is being ran off of magic, whether you want to call it black magic or white magic, or there's everything is a ritual. This world is ran by the alchemy, magic, rituals, and these holidays have a ritualistic aspect when it comes to it. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the origins and the rituals behind these holidays, because these holidays are, when you do the research behind the history of these holidays, these rituals and these holidays are performed during specific times of the year. So you have the spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox, and the winter solstice. And these rituals are being performed during specific times of the year, during the different seasons of the year. So as a reference, so you guys won't think that I'm just pulling information out the ass, I'm going to be using this book as a guide during this lecture. So this book is Celebrations, the Complete Book of American Holidays by Robert J. Myers. So this is the information that I got from this book right here that I'm going to be talking about in this lecture. All right. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the origins and the mysterious rituals that are behind these holidays. So let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first holiday we got is New Year's Day. So New Year's Day, we already know we celebrate New Year's Day every year on January 1st. Now this is the time to, get together with loved ones, celebrate with loved ones for the upcoming year. We gather around, drink, eat, have a good time. We may watch the countdown, the New Year's countdown on TV that's held in New York, or we might be there in person. This is the time to make goals for ourselves, New Year's resolutions, things of this nature. But in regards to New Year's Day, we have the god Janus, right? And we have the formation or the origin of the Gregorian calendar. So back a long time ago, the New Year was actually held on March 25th, okay? But during that time, the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar, he was the main head or the main figure when it comes to the formation of the Gregorian calendar. So initially, the calendar was devised up to 10 months of 304 days. But over time, the calendar became inconsistent with the movements of the sun and the moon, right? So he came up and had a meeting with several astronomers and mathematicians. And after this meeting, after this reconciliation, This is where the Gregorian calendar took place. This is where the new year began from being on March 25th to January 1st. This is how we got the original Gregorian calendar. In honor of January 1st being the new year, he honored this with the god Janus. Honored the god Janus for the movement or the switch between March 25th to January 1st. And Julius Caesar, they named the month July after Julius Caesar, right? So this is how the god Janus, and this is how the formation of the Gregorian calendar took place on New Year's Day. So the next holiday that we have up is Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day, celebrated every February of the month. This is a time for us to show love and appreciation to our significant other, to our husband, to our wife, to our spouse, right? We give gifts. We, decorate the house with flowers and, hearts and chocolate and these sorts of different things. So this is when the time where love is in the air, right? Where love is in the air. We show love to not just our spouse, but to, our parents, our mothers, these sorts of different things. This is when love starts to become just full. We embrace this is the realm of love. This is the time where we show love to the people that are important in our lives. But Valentine's Day stems from the individual by the name of Saint Valentine. Now, who is this Saint Valentine? Who is this person that's the cornerstone of the holiday Valentine's Day? Who is this individual? So everyone knows that St. Valentine's Day is that day of the year when friends and lovers express affection for one another through cards, candy, and flowers, whatever means the imagination can find. But no one is quite certain who this St. Valentine was, or more appropriately, who these Valentines were. So many different people, they, historians speculate that it might be three different individuals, because you have St. Valentine, but then there are other individuals who may be a part of it as well, but no one knows. But it's all theory and these sorts of different things. The early list of church martyrs reveal at least 3 Valentines, and one source boosted this number to an unwieldy 8, each of whom had his feast day on February 14th. Of the 3 most important Valentines, one is known only through the martyrdom which he shared with a group of believers. The other 2, a priest of Rome and a bishop of Interamna, are both said to have been beaten and beheaded by the Emperor Claudius II in AD 269 and then buried in the Flaminian Way. So various legends have come down to us concerning Valentine. He was said to have been in prison, and while there, he cured the jailer's daughter of blindness. Another story, in an attempt to associate him more closely with St. Valentine's Day, has him falling in love with the jailer's daughter and sending her a letter which he signed from your Valentine. So this is the most popular story. When you go into the details or the research of the history behind Valentine's Day, this is the most popular story or the most popular theory that one can find when it comes to the origin of Valentine's Day. So the various Valentines eventually evolved into one. Lovers' quarrels come under his jurisdiction, and naturally he is the patron saint of engaged couples, of anyone wishing to marry. So this is basically the smaller breakdown of when it comes to St. Valentine in regards to being the originator or the founding father of Valentine's Day. So there's another aspect to it. There's another aspect when it comes to Valentine's Day. So you have this event called the Lupercalia, the Roman festival Lupercalia, right? So this was a time where lots of orgies were being done. It's a lot of getting down, a lot of fucking, a lot of, you know what. These folks was getting down for real. So this was a time for a lot of matchmaking, these sorts of different things. So the most plausible theory for St. Valentine's Day traces its customs back to the Roman Lupercalia, a feast celebrated in February in honor of the pastoral god Lupercus, a Roman version of the Greek god Pan. The festival was an important one for the Romans, and occurring when it did naturally has some aspects of a rebirth right to it. Also during the Lupercalia, but in honor of the goddess Juno, Februata, the names of young women were put into a box. So this is when, the love making, the love matching. These are the sort of activities that took place during this time. So are you celebrating Valentine's Day, or are you celebrating the feast of Lupercalia? Youths then drew the names and the boys and girls so matched will be considered partners for the year, which began in March. Everywhere that the Christians came into power, they immediately adapted the holidays and customs of the people to their own creed. Now, it was a simple matter to call the day that this drawing took place St. Valentine's Day, for the date of his beheading and of the drawing were almost identical. To Christianize the heathen practice of picking lots for sweethearts, all that was needed was to replace the names of the girls with the names of saints, and to have the young people emulate the particular virtues of whatever they said, of whatever saint they drew. Incidentally, this custom is not dead today and is still observed in some religious orders. So this is basically the breakdown of how Valentine's Day came to be. Okay. So the next holiday we got is St. Patrick's Day, right? This has the origin behind the individual named St. Patrick. Now, St. Patrick celebrated every March. This is the time where everybody's wearing green. This is all about the Irish pride, the four-leaf clovers, everybody getting together, drinking beer, festivities, everybody getting together, just having a good time, right? Especially here in America. But all in all, in Ireland, it's different from Ireland celebrating St. Patrick's Day in Ireland versus America. In Ireland is more of a religious reform, but in America, this is celebrated by the Irish Americans, celebrating the Irish pride. Like I said, getting together, having certain festivities, drinking, just having a good time. So this individual by the name of St. Patrick, many people say that he wasn't necessarily born in Ireland. Many people say he was born in Britain and different countries. No one is certain for sure whether or not he was born in Britain or these sorts of different countries that exist in Europe. But many say that he was not necessarily born in Ireland. So St. Patrick, he was this individual who was this Christian figure who was trying to bring Christianity into the country of Ireland. So initially he was a slave. He was captured and made a slave and sent off to Ireland. But he had this prophetic dream. He had this spiritual awakening, this spiritual vision to allow him to escape from the hands of the enslavers in Ireland. And once he escaped, he had this other prophetic spiritual encounter, whatever you want to call it, to free the enslavers in Ireland, to free the people in Ireland. So does this story sound familiar to you? Sounds exactly like the Moses epic, doesn't it? But he was able to go back to Ireland and free the Irish people from enslavement. And he was able to bring forth the Christian religion, or the Christian aspect when it comes to the country of Ireland, right? And you have many stories of him drawing the snakes out of Ireland when he was on the mountain, and he was preaching a sermon, and he was able to draw the snakes out of the mountains, right? He was also able to teach the Irish people about the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he was this individual who brought Christianity to Ireland, to the country of Ireland. So in Ireland, this is celebrated as a religious reform. This is a religious, reform. But in America, it's celebrated totally differently. So that's basically the watered down or the breakdown of St. Patrick's Day. So then we have Easter / Resurrection Day. So this is Easter. Today is Easter. I'm going to be uploading this video on Easter Day. So Easter, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is when Jesus had died on the cross. Then 3 days later, he resurrected and ascended to heaven. So this is a time for us to, go to church. We go to church every Sunday, wear our white suits, our white dresses, being around family members and friends on this day to celebrate the life of Jesus Christ, to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? But when it comes to Easter, when it comes to this so-called Resurrection Day, it has its origin by the name of the goddess Ishtar. Now, Ishtar, the goddess Ishtar, is the Babylonian goddess of love, fertility, and sex, right? So when we think of Easter, another aspect of Easter is, of course, the bunny rabbit and the eggs, right? We have, the kids go Easter egg hunting. We play certain games when it comes to the Easter egg. When we find the Easter egg, we get a certain prize or we get money. We buy Easter egg baskets and these sorts of different things. But do we ever question and ask ourselves, what does the Easter bunny have anything to do with Easter? You see the Easter bunny, in the mall. The kids, they have the Easter bunny in the malls in certain places, as well as Santa Claus. I remember seeing the picture of me when I was a little kid sitting on the Easter bunny's lap. A lot of us have done that as well. But do we ever take the time to question and ask ourselves, where did the Easter egg come from? Where does the Easter bunny come from? So the Easter egg and the Easter bunny represent fertility. It represents sex. It represents the goddess Ishtar, right? These are the symbols. The Easter egg and the Easter bunny are representations of the goddess Ishtar. And goddess Ishtar is the representation of sex and fertility and love, right? So the Easter egg and the Easter bunny has nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Like I said, everything, when we're dealing with the ancient past, when we're dealing with these gods and goddesses that existed in the ancient past, everything is a ritual. Everything has a ritualistic aspect when it comes to these holidays. And most of us, we don't take the time to actually figure this stuff out and do our own research on these holidays. We're not even aware of us participating in these rituals that we know nothing about, right? So the Easter egg and the Easter bunny has nothing to do with Easter, has nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus Christ, all these sorts of different things. So that is the origin behind Easter in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So then we have Good Friday. Now, Good Friday has an Easter connection. So let me get into a little bit deep in depth into Good Friday. Because Good Friday falls under that Friday before Easter. And we don't know, or we're not aware that Good Friday has a connection to Easter Sunday. And most of these holidays have been Christianized by the past Roman emperors. They didn't start off, most of them didn't start off as Christian holidays, but they became Christianized later on down the line. So Good Friday is observed on the Friday before Easter. So in the early days of the Christian church, the Christian Passover, or Pascha, treated Christ's death and resurrection as one happening. So they didn't separate Good Friday from Easter. It was all one. So that there was no Good Friday separate from Easter Sunday. By the end of the 4th century in Jerusalem, however, all the days of Holy Week had become distinct from one another. No one has yet decided just where the name Good Friday comes from. One theory is that the good is a corruption of God's Friday. Another holds that good was always the word and refers to the good gift of salvation from sin that was bestowed on men through the sacrificial death of Christ. Other names for the feast are the festival of the crucifixion and the day of salvation. Both are very old. The Anglo-Saxons called it Long Friday. To the modern Greeks, it is known as Holy or Great Friday. And in France, Spain, and Italy, Holy Friday is the name used. Okay, so there's many different names before it became Good Friday. In the 4th century, the nun Etheria described the Good Friday practice of the veneration of the cross, which has continued to our own day in Roman Catholic churches. Through the years, the practice of venerating the cross, as done in Jerusalem, developed into the ceremony known as creeping to the cross. Originally, only the churches that claimed a portion of the true cross had this ceremony, but others later adopted it regardless of whether or not they had the relic. So Good Friday has this connection with Easter. It has this Christianized aspect when it comes to Easter. So this was the Good Friday in progression to the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So then we have Mother's Day. So Mother's Day is all about celebrating the mothers out in the world. You know, in modern times, we utilize this time to celebrate our mothers, to show love to our mothers for pushing us out of her and to bring us into this world, because she is the provider of life and she's the provider of the world, the feminine, the divine feminine. So we utilize this time to honor and celebrate our mothers. But in ancient times, this wasn't necessarily the case. This is a time to celebrate the mother goddess, all the different goddesses that different mythologies, different ancient cultures worship and celebrate. So this is all worship of the divine feminine counterpart. Because when we look at the earth, Gaia, the earth is a feminine planet. The earth is a feminine source, a feminine energy. So when we're tapped into that feminine energy, once we have a relationship with the many goddesses, once we have a relationship with the divine feminine, the earth, essentially, then we're able to tap into different levels and different powers of our own energy. So in the ancient times, Mother's Day was simply the worship or the remembrance or the appreciation to the divine feminine goddesses, right? And as well as Father's Day. So this is to appease the souls of your fathers. So Father's Day, same thing with Mother's Day. We honor our fathers. We honor our, the dad in our lives. Whether it be our biological father, or it could be somebody that's like a father figure to us, just like with a mother. Somebody who is a mother figure to us. We honor this time to celebrate our father, the fathers in our lives. But just like Mother's Day, we honor the dead. We honor the souls of the gods. We honor the souls of our fathers, right? When the fathers pass away and their souls depart, we utilize this time to appease the souls of the dead, to honor the dead. Right? This was done back in the ancient times as well, honoring the dead, honoring the souls who have departed from this physical realm. So we honor the gods that came before us, and our fathers who have left this physical plane to establish a relationship with our ancestors, or to establish a relationship with our fathers and the gods who came before us. So this is a time to appease the souls of our fathers. So then we have Memorial Day / Veterans Day, right? So this is basically, the time where we honor the veterans. We honor the people, not just the veterans, but the people in our family. The people who have, fought for this country, the people who have made changes and, sacrifice to make this world a better place, to make this country a better place, right? So this has a ritualistic aspect when it comes to when we honor the dead, just like in the Egyptian times or the Egyptian mythology during mummification, when they preserve the bodies, and when we honor the deceased, honor the deceased souls or the departed souls who have left this plane of existence. Just like when we make altars, right? We make altars to certain gods and to certain ancestors by providing different things that will appease the gods, that will appease the ancestors. We go to the graveyard, our deceased loved ones, our deceased family members, the veterans who have fought in the American wars to fight for this country. We lay flowers, or we, show appreciation, or we say our condolences to our loved ones in the graveyard. This has a ritualistic aspect when it comes to it. So Veterans Day ended up becoming a federal holiday, and the bill was signed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on June 1st, 1954. So Memorial Day, Veterans Day, this is not only the commemoration of the American soldiers who have fought for this country, who have died for this country, but also our loved ones who have passed on. So next we have the 4th of July / Independence Day. So this is time for us to, fireworks are being popped, celebrate the independence of our country. Our so-called forefathers who have signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. So this is a time for us to celebrate our independence from Great Britain, popping fireworks, the good old, the home of the brave, the land of the free. But the sad reality is, we may believe that we have gained independence during that time, but there was no independence for the African brothers and sisters. There was no independence for Black people during this time. Black people during this time were still enslaved. They were still slaves, right? So there were times where when the British were fighting the war against America, the British tried to recruit the Black people to fool them into thinking they were going to receive freedom for fighting this war, right? But they still, after the war, they were still enslaved. They were still captivated and enslaved, or they were denied reparations. They didn't receive reparations for their hard work and efforts. So this is a time for, African Americans, Black people, they didn't receive their independence. We were still slaves. We were still enslaved by the hands of our enslavers. But in 1863, January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves, essentially freed the slaves in the Confederate States. But later on, 2 years later, we had the holiday, the now federal holiday known as Juneteenth. June 19th, 1965 is when the rest of the slaves that were in Texas during that time became free, right? So this is now we celebrate the holiday which is known as Juneteenth. But essentially, the 4th of July, Independence Day, this was the freedom of white America. But in actuality, when it comes to Black people or Africans, that necessarily wasn't the case for us. So next holiday, Columbus Day. So we have, many people believe that Christopher Columbus was the first one that discovered America back in 1492. But I believe as time, especially now during this time, many people are aware of this fact that Christopher Columbus was not the first person to discover America, right? This became a federal holiday as well for us to, be off work or to be off school. But Christopher Columbus essentially was not the first person to discover America. So you have the Mali emperor known as Mansa Musa or Mansa Musa. He had a brother by the name of Mansa Abubakari II. He was the original person who discovered America 200 years before Christopher Columbus ever came to be around, right? So we have Christopher Columbus Day, which is the holiday that states that Christopher Columbus was the founding father of America. But essentially there was already individuals who existed in America, right? Not necessarily the Native Americans, right? We tend to believe that the Native Americans were the first people or the first group of people that were in America, but the Native Americans were essentially the mingling between the Africans and the Chinese that existed in that country at that time. But you had the Olmecs, people who were in that country, who existed in that country at that time. So you had, different traces. We have evidence of this. We have archaeological evidence when it comes to the Olmecs being the first original people in America. You had the different the statues with the big lips and the big nose, right? This is the essential key into the essential evidence, the physical evidence of Black people existing in the country at that time. So next up we have Halloween. Okay, this is, every October 31st to be specific, to be exact. This is a time for, kids, even grown adults who go trick-or-treating, go to different houses, wearing the costumes, dressing up as goons and goblins and demons and vampires and these sorts of different things. Trick-or-treating, asking for candy, going to these certain Halloween parties. This is a time for us to not be normal for one day and to dress up in, different outlandish costumes. But this holiday in itself has a ritualistic aspect when it comes to it as well. So we have the this entity which is known as Samhain. Probably butchering the name, but Samhain, which is the Lord of the Dead. So let's break down the history behind Halloween and how Halloween came to be in this present time, which is about, honoring the dead, warding off evil spirits, and these sorts of different things. So Halloween is observed, like I said, every October 31st. So while the name and most recent influences of Halloween, the name means the evening before All Hallows or All Saints Day, November 1st are Christian. The day itself is of Druidic origin. Most of the customs of the day are remnants of ancient religious beliefs connected with the celebrations of the New Year. First of the Druids and then the Romans who conquered them. For the Celtic tribes who followed the religion of the Druids inhabited Wales, Ireland, and the Highlands of Scotland, and the promontory of Brittany. November 1st was New Year's Day. It was also a joint festival honoring their sun god and Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. So you see in the connection here, all these different holidays, these specific holidays that I've been going over so far are in relation to the different gods and goddesses that these different cultural groups worshipped and honored. So they would provide offerings to the gods, to the goddesses, for a good harvest, or to receive blessings. So you see the ritualistic connection when it comes to these certain holidays and all these sorts of different things. So according to Sir James Fraser, these pastoral people selected this day because it marked the return of the cattle to the barns for the winter, just as their feast of Beltane on May 1st initiated the pasturing of the animals. The one day signified the beginning of winter and the other the beginning of summer, right? Just like I said, these holidays and these religious ceremonies were celebrated during the different times of the season. And this was very important to them because they were well aware of what to do when it comes to the different seasons in the vernal equinox and all these sorts of different things. So as in New Year's festivals around the world, this was a time when the dead flocked back to mingle among the living. The Celts believed that the sinful souls of those who had died during the year had been relegated to the bodies of animals. Through gifts and sacrifices, the sins could be expiated and the souls freed to claim a heavenly reward. Samhain judged the souls and decreed in what form their existence was to continue, whether in the body of a human being or an animal. Like I mentioned, all these different sacrifices, offering treats, offering animals, offering different gifts to appease the gods, to appease the goddesses. So now you have All Hallows E'en. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III moved the church festival of All Hallows or All Saints' Day to November 1st. The following century, Pope Gregory decreed that the day was to be a universal church observance. So you see the Christianized aspect of the Christian connection when it comes to all these holidays. It was in honor of all the saints who had died with or without official church recognition of their sanctity. The eve of All Saints' Day, All Hallows E'en, became known during the Middle Ages as the time favored by witches and sorcerers. So this is how the Halloween costumes and trick-or-treating came to be. The modern custom of going from door to door begging candy, nuts, apples, and pennies while masked and dressed in a grotesque or outlandish costume goes back ultimately to the pagan New Year feast. The ghosts that were thought to throng about the houses of the living were greeted with a banquet-laden table. At the end of the feast, masked and costumed villagers representing the souls of the dead paraded to the outskirts of town, leading the ghosts away. So the reason behind these costumes and these masks and dressing up as goons and goblins and these sorts of different things was to ward off evil spirits. They believed that dressing a certain way, performing different rituals, were to ward off evil spirits, to ward off the evil entities. So with the advent of Christianity, various explanations were forthcoming to give a more Christian rationale for the practice. The masking proceedings have thus been found in the costume parades of children who went around on the eve of All Saints' Day, the day following All Saints' Day, offering to fast for the departed souls in return for money or an offering. So another explanation is that the costuming stems from the medieval practice of displaying the relics of saints on All Hallows. The poorer churches could not afford relics and so instituted a procession with the parishioners dressed as the patron saints. The extras dressed as angels or devils, and everyone paraded around the churchyard. So as for the trick part of the trick-or-treat custom, it stems from the many years in this country when the night before Halloween was known as Mischief Night. In some places, the antics of this night were carried out on Halloween. Gates were unhinged and hidden. Ropes stretched across roads in the dark. Outhouses toppled. Doorbells rung. Bags of powder spilled on porches. That's when, you have the toilet paper, people wrapping around the toilet paper around different houses and trees and things of the sort. Bags of powder spilled on porches. In general, whatever mischief could be thought of was done. Like pranks, the ancient pranking. The basis for Mischief Night is the old belief in ghosts and fairies who roam the roads on Halloween night, curdling milk and riding people's horses to exhaustion. Any practical joke could thus be blamed on these little creatures over whom no one had any control. So that's basically the explanation behind the trick-or-treating in the costume aspect when it comes to Halloween. And then you have the jack-o'-lanterns, you have the pumpkins, people carving the pumpkins with different faces. So that's basically the way of warding off evil spirits. So this is basically the breakdown when it comes to the most popular Halloween holiday. So now we have Thanksgiving Day, the holiday of Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is a time where loved ones gather around the table, have the greens, beans, potatoes, tomatoes, lamb, turkey, cornbread, yams, stuffing, you name it, all the soul food that we black folks eat, right? This is a time for us to stuff ourselves, the food that we could just spend the time with family, having a good time with families, giving thanks to the Lord, giving thanks to God for the many blessings that he has bestowed upon us. But Thanksgiving Day has, I would say, a very dark history behind it, right? So we have the Harvest Festival, and the dark part about it is the annihilation or the mistreatment of the Native Americans. So when it comes to the harvest, we have these pilgrims who are set sailing on the Mayflower to come to America, right? They're going to be, abolished or killed in their native country of England. So they set sail on the Mayflower to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Now, some historians say that because of the storm that they had encountered while riding the Mayflower, that they were supposed to set sail to Virginia, or the storm had influenced them to set sail in the state of Virginia. But many other historians say that their destination was purely to go to Plymouth, Massachusetts. So the site which the Pilgrims chose for colonization was Plymouth, on the mainland, named in 1614 by Captain John Smith, who was exploring the coast for the Plymouth Company. The previous name of the town was Patuxet, Patuxet. When the Pilgrims arrived, it was a ghost town, a place of past horror. For 3 years, a plague had exterminated the Indian population. Like I said, the Europeans that came before the Pilgrims, who brought disease and all these sorts of different things to the Native American population. So December 11 was the day the colonists first set foot at Plymouth. Forefathers' Day, which commemorates this landing, is celebrated on December 21st, yada, yada, yada. So this is where Squanto comes in. So Squanto was the one who introduced himself to the colonizers, to the Europeans, and had helped them set up shop basically during the harsh winter times. So the most telling stroke of luck the Pilgrims had was in the person of an Indian, Squanto, who introduced himself to them soon after their landing. He never left them until the day of his death in 1622, and was so won over to the ways of his white friends that, according to Bradford's account, he besought Yea governor to pray for him that he might go to Yea Englishmen's God in heaven. Without him, the Pilgrims might never have survived their first winter. All right. So in the winter of 1620 to 21, Squanto had helped in the construction of houses. Now that fair weather had set in, his knowledge of agriculture guaranteed the colonists' livelihood. Bradford wrote, he directed them how to set their corn, where to take fish, and to procure other commodities, and was also their pilot to bring them to unknown places for their profit. Every school child knows of his advice to fertilize each hillock where corn was planted with a fish. He also taught the Pilgrims to build weirs in the streams to trap the spawning herring. So this individual Squanto, he was the one who had helped essentially the Pilgrims set up shop and to teach them about agriculture, harvesting, planting of crops, these sorts of different things. So this is where the celebration and the feast of the great harvest of what has come today as Thanksgiving with the food and the celebration, the Native Americans coming together with the Europeans in celebration of the great harvest. But most historians and most people who tell about this holiday want to tell about the good side of Thanksgiving, where the Native Americans and the Europeans come together in rejoicing. But essentially, when you look at it from a deeper perspective, from a deeper aspect, this was not so good for the Native Americans. This was not so good for the Native American community. So then we have, I would say, the most popular holiday in America, at least it was for me when I was a kid, is Christmas Day. So you know about, the theme behind Christmas Day, the most popular themes of Christmas Day. You got Santa Claus, you got, the Christmas tree, Christmas presents, the cookies, milk, all these sorts of different things. So from a religious aspect, people say that Christmas is supposed to be the day or the birth of Jesus Christ, right? They want to get rid of the Santa Claus aspect. They want to get rid of all the reindeer and this is not a time for Santa Claus, a fictional character. This is the time for Jesus. This is supposed to be a day for Jesus. This is supposed to be the celebration of Jesus' birth. But was Jesus actually born on Christmas Day? Was Jesus actually born on December 25th? You decide that for yourself. So let's go into aspect of Christmas. So I'm going to be going over the aspect of Jesus, the god Mithras. I'm going to be going over into all this, Saturnalia, Santa Claus, and Nimrod. So let's get into it. So let's start off with Jesus. Jesus was supposed to be born on this day. The biblical narrative of the birth of Jesus contains no indication of the date that the event occurred. However, Luke's report that the shepherds were abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night, suggests that Jesus may have been born in summer or early fall. Since December is cold and rainy in Judea, it is likely the shepherds would have sought shelter for their flocks at night. In the 3rd century, efforts were made to ascertain the date of the Nativity, but only in the year 336 was definite mention made of the December 25th festival in commemoration of Jesus' birth. This was in the Philocalian calendar and pertained only to the Western Church. By the middle of the 4th century, the feast was being celebrated in the eastern branches on January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany. This was an older feast commemorating the baptism of Jesus. There is no agreement among scholars as to whether the Feast of Christmas was of Eastern or Western origin. So, during Constantine's rule of the Roman Empire, he had converted to Christianity. So he was the one that Christianized the Roman Empire. Then later on, Pope Julius Caesar the first was the one who established December 25th as the birthday of Jesus Christ. And then Theodosius, the Emperor Theodosius, was the one who was able to Christianize the Roman state, or the state of the Roman. So let's get into the god Mithras. So this is the Mithraic influences on Christmas. So prior to the celebration of Christmas, December 25th in the Roman world was the Natalis Solis Invicti, or Invicti, the birthday of the unconquerable sun. So this essentially was the sun god. This is the Roman sun god that they worshipped. This feast, which took place just after the winter solstice of the Julian calendar, which is in honor of the sun god, Mithras, originally a Persian deity whose cult penetrated the Roman world in the 1st century BC. Right, so this is the sun god that the Romans had worshipped. And then eventually later on, sun worship was banished, and Pope Leo the Great in the 5th century tried to remove certain practices at Christmas, which he considered in no way different from sun worship. Okay, so Augustine urged his fellow Christians to observe the day not on account of the sun, but rather on account of God, the maker of the sun. So, even in the Egyptian religion, or the Egyptian mythology, you have many different aspects of the one God, or the God one, right? You have, Nut, Seshat, Tahuti, Jeb. You have all these different gods who had played a role, who were many different aspects of the one creator. But the religion of Christianity, and the emperors and the Romans and the popes who had tried to usher in this religion, try to keep you in a monotheistic type of learning, or a monotheistic type of way. But essentially, they were not the Egyptians, the Greeks. They were not essentially like worshiping different gods, but essentially, when you look at it from a bigger picture, from a different aspect, these different gods were all different aspects of the one creator. But Christianity tries to keep you stuck and lowered in a monotheistic religion. When you look at it from a monotheistic perspective, you are limiting yourself on knowing and discovering who God truly is, because we are all different aspects of God. We are all different aspects of the one creator. So let's get into Saturnalia. So this is the Saturnalia of Rome. Besides the Mithraic influence, other pagan forces were at work. From the 17th of December until the 23rd, Romans celebrated the ancient feast of the Saturnalia, a period of merrymaking and jubilation. It was commemorative of the golden age of Saturn, the god of sowing and husbandry, who brought the inhabitants of Italy peace and plenty under his wise rule. The Saturnalia was a time of equality between free men and slaves. The slave could shout at his master and carry on as lustily as he pleased. Actions that normally call for severe punishment will be overlooked in the social permissiveness of the season. Right? So that's the Saturnalia aspect when it comes to Christmas, or to the origin of Christmas, the golden age of Saturn. So let's get into Santa Claus. The most popular Santa Claus, the most famous character of Christmas is Santa Claus. Now, Santa Claus over time became a combination of many different beliefs, customs, and traditions. And then the combination of these beliefs, customs, and traditions ultimately form what is known as Santa Claus. But 3 names were given to Santa Claus here in America. You have the individual named Saint Nicholas. Other individual is Kris Kringle, and the other individual is Santa Claus. So that's how Santa Claus essentially came to be within a smaller breakdown of it. And then you got Nimrod. Now, Nimrod is believed to be born on December 25th as well. So he was basically this Babylonian king who ruled in Babylon, in ancient Babylon. Now, he was believed to have built the Tower of Babel, but no one knows for sure exactly. But many believe this is how the Christmas tree came to be when he ended up passing, and his wife / mother ended up planting a tree on his grave in commencement and remembrance of Nimrod. So this is how the Christmas tree came to be when it comes to Nimrod. So all these different things, all these different combinations of stories and epics, whether it be Jesus, Mithras, Saturnalia, Santa Claus, and Nimrod, all of these came to be in the formation of the holiday known as Christmas. Right? So then we got Mardi Gras. Okay? So this is a period where the holiday of Mardi Gras is celebrated in New Orleans every year, right? With the music, the fashion, the eating, the fun, the games, the festivities, all these sorts of different things. Mardi Gras is celebrated in the city of New Orleans every year. But the origin behind Mardi Gras is the confessing of sins. So I'm going to get into that aspect of it. Let me see. Mardi Gras. Where's Mardi Gras? Mardi Gras. Page 30. So this is Mardi Gras, also known as Shrove Tuesday. That was another name for it. So it is observed the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. Earliest observance was the Middle Ages. So Shrove Tuesday or Mardi Gras is the day before the start of Lent. Its name is derived from the Old English practice of confessing one's sins on this day in preparation for the holy Lenten season. The verb to shrive means to confess oneself and receive absolution. The 3-day period, Sunday, Monday, and Shrove Tuesday, was known as Shrovetide. So you see the Christian connection when it comes to many of these holidays. Majority of these holidays, as a matter of fact. So you have Mardi Gras, it's the confessing of sins, right? In preparation for the Holy Lenten season. The verb to shrive means to confess oneself and receive absolution. So that's basically the breakdown of Mardi Gras, the confessing of sins, right? So then you have April Fool's Day, which is the ancient New Year celebration. So April Fool's Day was not that long ago. Which celebrate on every year on April 1st. So let's get into that. Let's get into April Fools. If I can get to it. All right. Hold on a second. God dang, man. Technical difficulties. It's all good though. Technical difficulties, it's all good though. Book is still messed up, but it's all good. So, the origins of April Fool's Day has never really been determined. Some speculate that it derives from an ancient New Year festival celebrated the vernal equinox. It bears certain resemblances to Hilaria, an ancient Roman festival in honor of a nature goddess, which is celebrated on March 25th. Most likely, however, the day is of independent origin. But whatever its roots, the timing of April Fool's Day is certainly appropriate, since it occurs during that part of the year when nature fools men with capricious changes from showers to sunshine. The April day of the holiday is supposedly derived from France, following the Gregorian calendar. You see the Christian connection again? Change of 1582, when the new year was moved from March 25th to January 1st. Gifts and visits had always been exchanged at the New Year season, which ended on April 1st. With the change in dates, the more conservative and forgetful Frenchmen were ridiculed with mock gifts and visits of trumped up solemnity. So this is basically, the belief of the origin of April Fool's Day, many speculations, but it's not a widely celebrated holiday, but at the same time, it's very popular, right? This is the time for, the pranksters, the old thing where people say a certain thing and, something is supposed to be happening, and then you come up with the phrase April Fools. So it's not a widely celebrated holiday, but it's very popular at the same time. So that's basically April Fool's Day. So let's get now into the origin of the Passover. Now, the Passover has its origin within the book of Exodus in the biblical text. So the Passover, or the Pesach, is observed 7 days for Reform and Israeli Jews, or 8 days for Orthodox and Conservative Jews, beginning with the eve of the 15th day of the lunar month of Nisan, March to April. So the original ordinances concerning the observance of Pesach, or Passover, are found in the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. On the 10th day of the lunar month of Nisan, the first month of the Jewish year, corresponding roughly to the period from mid-March to mid-April, the Israelites were to take for each household an unblemished lamb from their flocks. On the 14th day, in the evening, the lamb was to be slaughtered and its blood placed on the doorsteps and lintel of each house. So this is the sacrificing of the lamb, the bloodshed of the lamb, right? They say that these individuals were making sacrifices to God, but are they really talking about the creator of all? Or are they talking about the gods who came to this planet? Are they talking about the Elohim? Are they talking about these beings or these entities masquerading as gods, acting like they are God and portraying as God? See, they say God, they use God in a singular sense in the Old Testament, which really means gods, plural with an S. The people were to eat the lamb roasted whole, along with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. Any flesh of the lamb that was left over to the next morning was to be burned, not eaten. So this was to be the Israelites' last meal in Egypt before the redemption from slavery, right? The Exodus, Moses coming to free his people from the enslavement of the Egyptians. They were to sit and eat, prepare for journey, sandals on their feet, staff in hand. That night, an angel of the Lord was to travel through Egypt and execute judgment, right? Lord, or the angel meaning alien or extraterrestrial, slaying all the firstborn of Egypt. Now, I remember my first time reading the Old Testament, and it goes on to saying, they saying God was killing babies, God destroying crops, destroying land. And I'm saying to myself, why would God, the loving creator of all, that's omnipotent, omnipresent, why would God do these destructive things? And we tend to believe that God we believe, especially within the Bible, we believe everything that the Bible says, right? We know that the Bible is not the 100% truth when it comes to spirituality, right? The Bible is used as a mechanism and has many different esoteric meanings and messages behind it. So I was saying to myself, why would God, the creator of all, do these sorts of destructive things? But now I come to realize that they're not talking about a singular God. They're talking about multiple deities. They're talking about multiple gods. Only those houses with the lamb's blood on their doorsteps will be spared. These the angel would pass over. So this day was to be commemorated as a memorial day in generations to come. It was to commence a 7-day period of festival observance, during which time no leavened bread or leavening substance was to be found in any Israelite house. Unleavened bread was to be eaten instead. The first and last days of the festival were to be solemn convocations, during which no work could be done. But the story of the Passover, as we read in Exodus, was cast into writing many centuries after the original events. It was a composite festival, possibly representing the traditions of the different tribes and peoples that made up ancient Israel, those that came out of Egypt and those that joined them later in the desert, right? The Exodus, the expedition of Moses and his people in the land across the Jordan River and in the land of Canaan itself. The various elements, the Passover lamb, the unleavened bread, the household celebration, the public convocation, and the story of the deliverance from Egypt fused into a festival much greater than the sum of its parts. A celebration not just of a specific historical event, but of freedom itself, and of the religious dedication and respect for the law and life that give meaning to freedom. Passover was to be a time of thanksgiving, of spring renewal, of family and community solidarity. Its hold on the Jewish people, its tremendous significance in Jewish life and thought cannot be calculated. So essentially, the holiday of Passover was to be a celebration of being free from restrictions, right? You can look at it as a message or as a symbolism of freedom from restrictions, freedom from enslavement, all these sorts of different things. So that's basically the essential meaning or the message or the history behind Passover, the day of Passover. So then we got Chinese New Year, right? I know this is a long video, so hopefully you've got your popcorn or whatever, taking the time to actually dissect this information, because I know this is going to be a long video. But we got the Chinese New Year. So the Chinese New Year is very different from our New Year, how we celebrate the New Year, right? Their calendar is very different, the way it's structured according to the different seasons, right? So you have the, Chinese New Year, they have the celebration of the different animals. The different animals represent the different times of the year. So let's get into the Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year, page 22. Let's get into the Chinese New Year. So there are some 435,000 persons of Chinese ancestry in the United States today. More than half were born here. Other minority groups number more people, but none celebrate a holiday that can match the pageantry of the Chinese New Year and its spectacular dragon pride. So you have the different, the festival where the golden dragon appears. Right, this is the main theme behind the Chinese New Year festival, is the golden dragon. So, back in the past, the Chinese ended up coming to America in search of a greater opportunity. So this is where, the Chinese inhabitants, you have, Chinatown that exists in the United States, where they're able to celebrate the Chinese New Year. So the Chinese lunar calendar. The Chinese calendar is a combination of mathematical complexities and symbolic tradition. It is based on an intricate chronologically, can't even say the word, chronologically, that dates back to the 27th century BC. The 12 animals are associated with the calendar, and according to legend, were selected on the basis of a cross-country race. The 12, in order to finish, are rat, ox, tiger, hare, dragon, serpent, horse, ram, monkey, rooster, dog, and boar. Also connected symbolically to the calendar are 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. So during the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to AD 220, the calendar system was revised into 60-year cycles, each year designated by a combination of one of the 12 animals and 5 elements. The Chinese commonly call the year only by its animal name, the year of the rat or the year of the ox, right? So these different animals represent different times of the year. Very, very symbolic. The 12 months of the Chinese calendar contain only 29 or 30 days each. The total, therefore, does not add up to the 365 days of the solar year. To make up for this, a double month is added every 30 months. Since their calendar does not have the Christian division of BC and AD, the Chinese reached the year 4670 in 1972. So you see how the Chinese New Year, the Chinese celebration, is very different from how we celebrate the New Year. So then you have Groundhog Day. This is not a wide celebratory holiday, but I had to include this in here because just like April Fool's Day, a lot of people mention it. A lot of it comes up within America. Not a wide, well-known, not a wide celebrated holiday, but it is very popular at the same time. So this was used as a weather/seasonal tool, specifically by the Germans. So it was used as a weather tool. So Groundhog Day. In Germany, the farmers would observe the badger as he emerged from his winter sleeping quarters underground. If the animal saw his shadow, that is, if the day was sunny, he would become frightened and dug back for another nap, including 6 more weeks of winter. If the day was cloudy and the badger threw no shadow, he then ventured out into the world, confident that spring was just around the corner. The farmer watching these maneuvers of the badger supposedly knew whether or not to plant his crops. So Groundhog Day was essentially the way Germans, based on what the groundhog did, what the groundhog would do in order to make certain decisions when attaining the harvest or attaining the crops, right? So he used the groundhog as a way or as a tool to make certain decisions when it comes to the harvest. Okay. So last but not least, the final holiday we have is Hanukkah. So Hanukkah in Hebrew means dedication. So like the Passover, the holiday Passover, this can be used as a symbolic representation of freedom from oppression, freedom from slavery, freedom from, the hands of people who are trying to suppress, who are trying to enslave. So this is a symbolic relation when it comes to freedom and harmony. And then a lot of people associate the holiday of Hanukkah with the holiday of Christmas, because you see a lot of similarities. I'll be getting into that in a minute. So Hanukkah is observed for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of the lunar month of Kislev, from November to December. So, like I said, Hanukkah means in Hebrew, dedication. It is the annual feast of dedication celebrated by Jews for 8 days, commencing with the 25th day of the lunar month of Kislev, falling normally in December. This is when, since it's celebrating December, this is the correlation with Christmas as well. During these days, burning candles are placed in a 9-branch menorah, the traditional Jewish Hanukkah candelabrum. Probably not saying that right. For this reason, Hanukkah is also called the Feast of Lights. The origins of the festival go back to the 2nd century BC, the early post-biblical period of Jewish history, about which relatively little is yet known. One of the chief sources of information about this period is the collection of Jewish writings known as the Apocrypha text that has been taken out of the Bible, one of the many books that has been taken out of the Bible, containing the books of Maccabees, which recount some of the historical background of Hanukkah. So in 175 BC, the Syrian Empire came under the rule of Antiochus. He was an ambitious monarch who waged war against the rival kingdom of Egypt. In order to consolidate his political power, he undertook a vigorous campaign to establish political and religious conformity within his own territories. All right, so this is how you see how this can be a symbol of freedom of expression, freedom of practice, right? Just like with the Roman Catholic Church utilizing Christianity and religion to keep us enslaved. But now, since we're living in the age of Aquarius, we're living in the age of knowledge, we're starting to, rise up and to understand and gain a certain amount of knowledge that was lost and left behind, but now it's coming up to the surface. He replaced the Jerusalem high priest Onias with Onias' brother Joshua. Joshua is strongly sympathetic to Antiochus' program to Hellenize the Jews, changed his name to Jason, constructed a gymnasium, and encouraged the adoption of Greek dress and customs among the priesthood and upper class of Jerusalem. All right? So the most serious violation of Jewish custom occurred when Antiochus decreed that the temple of Jerusalem was to become a temple of the Greek god Zeus. Altar statues of that deity were set up, bearing the likeness of the emperor himself, who, adopting the surname Epiphanes, I'm butchering all these names, God manifest, proclaimed himself in the incarnation of the god. Thus, by a combination of public laxity and official decree, the religious integrity of the Jews had been undermined to a degree no longer tolerable. So the Jews, they were being forced to be accustomed to the Greek way of life. So this is the Maccabean revolt. Reaction began to set in. A sect of Orthodox Jews had risen known as Hasidim, poised not to be confused with the modern Jew sect called Hasidim that originated in the 18th century, who resisted the trend toward assimilation. At first, the resistance was nonviolent and clandestine. Following the king's decrees in 168 BC, forbidding many sacred Jews' practices, the resistance changed to armed rebellion. The outbreak occurred when the king's officers attempted to enforce the new decrees in the small town of Modin. A leader of the town, an aged high priest named Mattathias, declared publicly, this is from a scripture in the Bible, I'm not going to read that. Following this, Mattathias ran and killed a Jew about to sacrifice on the altar of Zeus and cried out of the populace, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me." And he and his sons and their followers took to the hills in armed rebellion. So the more sedate Hasidim eventually threw in their lot with the followers of Mattathias. And under the leadership of Mattathias' son, Judah the Maccabee, who's known as Hammer, the partisans succeeded in prevailing against the Antiochus forces. After driving the Syrian garrison off the Temple Hill, they purged the sanctuary of his desecrations and reinstituted the traditional order of worship. On the 25th day of Kislev, they proclaimed an 8-day ceremony of rededication, which became commemorated through the ages of Hanukkah. So this is how, the Maccabee or Mattathias was able to come in and reestablish the Jewish order, reestablish what is known as Hanukkah. So this is the significance of Hanukkah. The meaning behind these events transcends the simple conflict of Jewish values with Hellenistic values. It lies in the more fundamental struggle of religious and cultural minorities to preserve their integrity against social pressures of assimilation and against coercion by a national state. So like I said, it has a similar meaning behind it, just like it did with the Passover, a representation of freedom and acceptance of oneself. So then, you had the, later on down the line, Hanukkah was celebrated by the Festival of Lights, coming together, Thanksgiving. This is how it became tied with Christmas. So the importance of Hanukkah has perhaps been exaggerated as a result of its proximity to Christmas. At one time during the Roman period, efforts were made by certain rabbis to suppress the observance of Hanukkah because of an underlying ideology that seemed to condone civil rebellion. Today, by contrast to the distress of some Jews concerned with preserving the integrity of the holiday, Hanukkah tends to take on some of the popular elements of Christmas celebrations. Gifts are exchanged, homes are decorated, and festive meals are prepared. Like other Jewish holidays, however, Hanukkah combines joy with solemnity. Its central symbol is still the light, standing for divine providence and for the burning dedication of a people to preserve its identity. So there you have it, guys. These are the breakdown of the most popular American holidays that I got from this book. There are many other different holidays that are within this book, many other different holidays that a lot of people don't talk about, but these are some of the holidays that I believe are most popular among the American country. So hopefully you guys have learned something from this video. Hopefully you learned about the origins and the rituals that and the stories behind these specific holidays. So when it comes to, celebrating holidays, I'm not saying that you shouldn't celebrate these holidays or these holidays are bad or any of these sorts of different things. Just be mindful of, what you're celebrating. Be mindful of what you are doing when it comes to these holidays. Are you actually celebrating, your loved ones? Or are you participating in a certain ritual that you are not aware of? Right? So, be creative. Celebrate your own holidays. You don't have to celebrate the many holidays that exist. Most of these holidays are used as, consumerism, right? We spend all this money going to these stores, buying these things when these holidays come around, just because they exist. But come up with your own holidays. Be creative and come up with your own holidays. Buy your parents or buy your significant other gifts, on a random day, just for the fun of it, just to show appreciation. You don't have to go along with the crowd, go along with the world, and celebrate these holidays if you don't want to, because you have that freedom. It's all about freedom, all right? So till next time, and always remember, all power resides from within, and always keep the faith because God in the universe is always working for you. Take care, guys, and God bless.